Hi, this is Kimberly. Today I would like to read to you a blog by Detective Dave Baumhover. He, of course, was the detective on the Chris Asshat Watts case, working for the Frederick Police Department in Frederick, Colorado. He is on a leave of absence, or he may be retired due to the PTSD that he's been experiencing because of what that fucking asshole did to his beautiful family. He is among many that had to clean up that goddamn fucktard's calamity and recover his gorgeous, sweet, smart, witty, loving, and devoted family that he left at Survey 319 in a horrific shambles. People, very brave, bold, chivalrous, courageous, heroic, gallant people had to take on the task of trying to set right the ghastly and unspeakable deed that fucktard did. I don't even know how to say it, what he did and what they had to do to make it right. There's no words. I've been struggling with the words for almost an hour, seriously. Fuck you, Christopher Lee Watts. You shit for brains, damn douchebag, brain dead, soul dead, sewage, tomfuckery, trouser, cough, beady-eyed weasel, tampon tongue, pond scum, prince of darkness, moronic, prick, fuckface, jack-off, doofus, ass monkey, shitlord, arsehat, clod, cretin, dimwit, asshead, shitwit, stupid as hell, fathead, unsophisticated, douche kebab, dickosaurus, ass clown, asshole, bastard, jerk, dumbfuck, asswipe, dickhead, douche canoe, douche wash, jackass, douchewagon, jagweed, contemptible fuckstick, dingleberry. I hope karma dry fucks your ass with a big fat cactus. Sorry, I blacked out for a brief moment. I do that when I'm blind with rage. Did I perchance say anything? However, for this video, I'm going to read a blog post by Mr. Dave Baumhover. He is but one of the untold, immeasurable individuals that has had their life forever changed by this son of a bitch, asshole, moron, dickhead, jerk-off. After the reading, I'm going to play a very short clip of a gentleman who stopped by the gravesite of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico to pay his respects. Some of you may find it to be upsetting, so I just wanted to give you a heads up. I hope you savor and cherish the rest of your day or evening. Much love and peace. Thank you for listening. So this blog is by Detective Dave Baumhover. This was published January 12th, 2020. This blog post is titled February 18th, 2019, the day that the glass tipped. When you have PTSD, you're likely to have strong feelings of anxiety, anger, sadness, and guilt, among others. In the beginning, I had all of these, but especially guilt. On the eve of August 15th, 2018, I was in my office writing a search warrant, an affidavit for the Survey 319 tank site based on the evidence discovered there earlier, when I received a text message to return to the war room where the Watts interview was being monitored by the investigation team via CCTV. By the time I got there, it was too late, and the ball was in motion to solicit some kind of confessional statement from Watts. Or was it too late? We certainly didn't need anything outside of the truth, so why didn't I stop it? Could I have stopped it? Was I too focused on the search warrant? For many months after this case closed, I asked myself these questions. I had overwhelming feelings of guilt and regret for not stopping the interview before Watts blamed Shanann for the murders of Bella and Celeste. As the lead, I felt responsible that Shanann was vilified and felt compelled to gather the information the Rusick family needed to clear her name. These feelings of responsibility, guilt, and regret compounded my PTSD and depression for nearly a year, but through therapy I've accepted that I did the best I could at that moment, and trying to control every aspect of the case would have been impossible for anyone. Prior to Chris Watts pleading guilty on November 6, 2018. I was full on speed, working nearly 60 hours a week, preparing for a potential capital punishment case. The chief opened another detective position after learning I would likely be working a 5-year assignment. I had since released the CBI and FBI agents, with the exception of some mop-up so I could concentrate on what needed to be done and not on what every other outside agency investigator was doing. When Watts pled guilty, I felt like I ran into a brick wall. It was over and I wasn't done. Although I knew he was solely responsible, I didn't know why or specifically how he committed his crimes. And a several-week closing process after his plea didn't reveal anything. I hoped it would, but didn't expect it to. February 18th, 2019. I was in a computer training room located in the depths of the Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin. With me were two of the many agents who assisted me in the murders investigation. I can't speak for the agents who were with me that day. My reason for being there was to gain closure for myself and, more importantly, the Rusick family. By this time I had grown to know the Rusicks and consider them an extension of my family. After Watts' quasi-confession on August 15th, 2018, I needed to know the truth about what really happened, and I needed to hear it from Watts himself. I also needed to know why and to connect all of the little puzzle pieces floating around in my head. Pieces formed by collecting as many details as I could over a 4-month period and dissecting my observations while at the house numerous times, searching the vehicles and Survey 319 and reviewing video footage and dozens of reports. I've never been the type of person to settle with "it just happened that way" or "this is the way it is" with anything, whether it's a mechanical device of some kind or even how a hurricane forms. I'm a detailed person, and I have to know the details of how something works or why something happened to fully understand it. When Watts described what he did, the missing puzzle pieces came together in my head, but I didn't feel the relief I expected. I felt shock and horror, as I knew the majority of what he said was true. Later that evening in my hotel room, I learned what happens when the glass tips and your brain has had enough. I experienced extreme anxiety and panic, strong emotions of anger, sadness, disbelief, and feeling completely out of control. I had flashbacks so severe I thought I was at the recovery scene. When I came back to Earth, I knew I needed some type of distraction to stop the images and thoughts running through my head, so I turned my headphones to the max volume while playing music. Shortly thereafter, my wife, Lori, called. I knew she was calling to see how my day in the interview went, but I told her I couldn't talk to her and hung up. It was a shitty thing to do, and I know it frightened her immensely, but I just couldn't talk about it. When the sun came up, I headed for the Milwaukee airport. It was a difficult drive as I was looking around for anything I could find joy in to distract me, but because it was February in Wisconsin, there weren't many options. Just frigid cold, wind, and snow. I arrived at the airport several hours before my flight and began surfing the web for anything related to classic cars, as I knew it would put me in a better place, or at least I thought. Images and uncontrollable emotions took over again, and I made several trips to the bathroom stalls to pull myself together. I moved around the waiting area in an attempt to avoid people, but eventually it became impossible. I requested via text to take the following day off to clear my mind. I was convinced if I took a day off, I'd be back to normal and could return to work. When I finally made it onto the plane, I was so exhausted I fell asleep and didn't wake until we were landing. After a short nap, I felt the energy to keep it together long enough to get home. Lori didn't ask me what was said in the interview, and I didn't offer information either. I don't recall how much of that day after I got home, but Lori described me as being in an emotional yet zombie-like state until I went to bed. I didn't sleep much that night as I continued to experience flashbacks and thought about what and how I was going to tell Sandy, Frank, and Frankie what I had learned in the interview. The following morning, I changed my mind about taking the day off, as I felt it was important to call the Rusiks immediately for two reasons. First, they knew why I was going to Wisconsin, because we discussed it prior to me leaving. Second, but more importantly, I wanted them to hear it from me and not some social media outlet. As I sat at the dining table and thought about how I was going to tell them, Lori asked me why I was going into work. At that point, I lost control again and broke down sobbing. It was the first time she saw me cry, which actually brought her some relief. I couldn't keep my emotions in check any longer as I thought about what I was going to say to Frankie and Sandy. I wasn't in the right state of mind to speak with them, but I had to. When we arrested Watts, the Rusiks found out through a social media site, and I was not going to take the chance of that happening again. Not long after the Wisconsin interview, I realized PTSD is real and why people who suffer from it can choose suicide. For the first few months, I was in a very dark place, but thankfully I sought treatment. I've learned the Watts case wasn't the cause of my PTSD, but rather the final straw, as it were. Looking back, I believe my glass was about 80% full prior to this case. I also learned I had symptoms shortly after the sentencing, but didn't recognize them as symptoms of PTS. I wasn't able to sleep through the night, experienced weight and hair loss, and was easily agitated by anyone around me. My wife continually asked me what was wrong, and I answered her with the usual, "Nothing, I'm fine." My tenure in law enforcement extends 20 years and includes areas of detentions, parole, gang violence, and investigations. As with all people who repeatedly deal with trauma, I experienced many traumatic events, which silently chipped away at my psyche. At first I felt things emotionally, but I learned over and over to choke it down and move on. After a while I became numb and somewhat uncaring. I mentally categorized people as evidence in an attempt to remove human element. If you've been in this type of profession, not just law enforcement, for any length of time, you can probably relate. I remain on medical leave from my position as detective for the Frederick, Colorado Police Department. My leave officially started last spring when I was diagnosed with both acute PTSD and mild depression. I didn't have a choice as the workman's comp status went into effect very quickly. I now know it was the right decision as I'm in no condition to continue working. For nearly a year now, I've stayed mostly isolated from the public to avoid triggers. I've also been in intensive EMDR and exposure therapy to help rewire my brain and cope with these triggers. I'm happy to report that the process is working and I'm beginning to gain control of my life again. It's a long road and I have my limitations, but I know it will be worth it in the end. My point of sharing this first post and this blog is to help break the stigma surrounding mental health wellness and to advise against letting things get too far. My career is likely over, but it didn't have to be. If you're a first responder or exposed to repeat trauma, you need to take care of you as you experience traumatic events. Choking it down or laughing it off does not work and could be a career ender, or far worse, you could lose your family or your life. There are numerous anonymous outlets where you can get help or just unload. Take advantage of them. I wish I would have. In loving memory of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico.
I don't know if anybody remembers last year, a woman and her two daughters were murdered by her husband in Colorado. Chris Watts was the guy that killed his wife and two daughters. This is their grave site in Aberdeen, North Carolina. And she was pregnant.